I want to begin by introducing a distinguished young scholar who's we're blessed to have working with us. She's been in Brazil for a number of weeks. She's been a professor here at Dartmouth. She's written a magnificent dissertation comparing the rich tradition of our Irish brothers and sisters in the form of a figure named Synge, S-Y-N-G-E, a play called Playboy of the World. You wouldn't get a chance to read and see that sometime in your life. This compares a literary genius who came out of Florida named Zora Neale Hurston. So you get the Irish tradition and the black tradition, conversation and contrast and comparative analysis with one another. But we are so blessed to have her back from Brazil. She'll be with us for the rest of our time. I'm talking about my dear sister, Shante Nicole Mutana Kenyon. Absolutely. Give it up for our sister. Give it up for Sister Shante. Very much so. Yeah, I know many of you all have had her in classes. Is that right? Some of you all have already taken classes from her? So you know what I'm talking about. All that I said, fully confirmed. Isn't that right, though, brother? Yes, indeed, indeed. He's not doing that just because he got a good grade either. He's a truth teller. Absolutely. Secondly, I want to introduce two distinguished graduates of Dartmouth who represent so much of the best of the rich tradition of Dartmouth. Dartmouth's tradition is so very, very capacious and rich, a variety of different figures and individuals and students and what have you. And they will be giving not so much a presentation, but a dialogue with students. They're concerned about students' voices as it relates to the present and future of Dartmouth as alumni. I'm talking first about my dear sister, Nikita. Please just stand and give her a hand, Sister Nikita. Definitely, right? Oh, he's a relatively young graduate of Dartmouth, represents so much of the best of Dartmouth. And then my dear sister Maria. Now, Maria herself is one which I have been blessed to work with for the last 5 years. She lives in Florida, but she worked in New York City. She is a leader, a visionary leader in terms of the alumni of Dartmouth, as well as quite an activist in terms of the larger society and what have you. But we're very blessed to have her as well. It's so good to see her. I don't get a chance to see her that often. Sister Maria, give it up for Sister Maria. Definitely. Definitely. And then, oh, you know what I did want to mention? There was a sister I met who's had the Tucker Fellows, and she just had a baby. Does anybody know her name? Leah. Let's say her name together. Leah Torrey. Yes, because she was just lovely. And I think her baby now is about 12, 13 days. Is that right? Anybody know the name of the baby?
John Lee Torrey.
Let's say his name. John Lee Torrey. No, because we've got to introduce a brother to the world. Hey, he just got here. You know what I mean? He's in space and time. Just because you're here, you can't be holding off. We glad he's here. We glad John's here? Yeah, let's give it up for Brother John. Give it up for Brother John. Definitely, definitely, definitely. And anytime I get a chance to spend time with my beloved Alexis, you know, she was here 2 weeks before. I told you all she's a distinguished professor, written one of the best books ever on William James. And I'm just so glad to have her back again. Give it up for Sister Alexis. Absolutely. Now we're going to dive into the black belt. As you recall, last paragraph, the chapter before, I sit with Shakespeare and he winces not. You all recall that moment? He's above the veil, sublime, transcending. And now we get the immersion. Now we get the wholesale descent, this narrative of descent. We've already talked before about the burial. We already talked before about excavation. We already talked before about getting under, the depth underneath what is manifest. Now we have reached the very center and the core of the descent. It gets no deeper here. It gets no deeper here. And the reason why I put up these figures here, because it helps us understand what's going on. The foundational text in Western civilization linked to the legacy of Athens is Plato's Republic. And the first line of Plato's Republic, someone may not remember at the moment, but those who have, how many have read the Republic before? So we got a little sense. The first line is what? Katabin. Yesterday I went down to Piraeus. Piraeus is the site of commerce and democracy. So you know it's going to be an indictment of democracy. He's going down into Hades. He's going down into hell. He's going down into darkness. He's going down to unbelievable pain and suffering from Plato's point of view. You see that? Going down. And we turn to lines 514a in chapter 8 of that text, the famous analogy of the cave. And we're going to come back to this. The famous analogy of the cave. Plato himself, suspicious of poetry, but quite poetic himself. Highly suspicious of literary discourse, but himself a great literary artist. He talks about the human condition as being caught in a cave, a dark cave, chained to the wall blank, perceptions of shadows and the shadows of real things, unable to gain access to a perception of real things. Just doxa, just opinion, no access to reality, to knowledge, episteme, no access to a grounded, valid perception of the world. And the end and aim is to what? Emerge out of that cave and gain access to the idea of the good, the idea of agathon, the sun. And we're going to see Du Bois using the language of black folk caught in a darkness, caught in an American cave-like condition, caught trying to gain access to a reality, but unable to distinguish between the shadow of things and the things themselves. It does not get more foundational than the descent into the underworld, the descent into the underbelly, the descent into that which is hidden and concealed by so much of mainstream ways of perceiving the world. That's why we begin with both the catapult, the first word in Plato's Republic, going down, and then the cave itself. It's Dantes. You don't get deeper than Dante. I know many of you have read the Inferno. Is that right? How many read the Inferno before? How many plan to read the Inferno before you die? Oh, Dartmouth, you all bring joy to my heart. That's right, the Dantes descent. Finding oneself in the middle of the woods. Reminds you a little bit of Sondheim's Into the Woods. It's another American genius. You know Sondheim's Into the Woods, though, don't you? Isn't that a powerful play? Yes. Hollywood, Act 1. Here After Darkness, Act 2. There's a line in that play that says, dreams come true but not free. You can write a dissertation on that line. Dreams come true but not free. You fall in love with the prince and discover he ain't got too much to offer. Is that all there is? Ah, so it is. So it is with Dante's Inferno. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. The black belt, Du Bois's great treatment of keeping track of the precious lives of black people in the underworld of an America's often celebrating itself too often uncritically. He said, this is going to be Dante-esque. Can you imagine engaging in a Dante-esque analysis of an America that views itself mourning in the sunshine all the time? Du Bois says that's what this text in part is about. And of course, such analysis can be made of what? Every nation, every country, and not only that, but of every human being. Each and every one of you have a Dante-esque pilgrimage that you can undergo in relation to your own soul. The underworld that you often hide and conceal. That's the question of what it means to be human. That's the question of what it means to be modern. That's the question of what it means to be an American or an Ethiopian or, of course, Costa Rican or Russian. But in this case, we're talking about what does it mean to be human with black bodies, black imagination, and black intelligence, you see. That Dante has that Inferno movement. Now, I mentioned Joseph Conrad because of his great 1899 text, Heart of Darkness. And we are piercing into the American heart of darkness. Where was Conrad's novel primarily focused on? Somebody tell me. Africa, Congo. Absolutely. And what's the last words of Kurtz in that novel? Somebody tell me. Holler it out. That's right. The horror. If Kurtz had the genius of a Bobby Bland, we were listening to Bobby Bland yesterday, he would have sang the blues. The horror, the horror. That's what the black belt is all about. You see, it's not just a sociological analysis of how Negroes are doing on the other side of town. It's a human cry of the heart, the horror of it all, the terror of it all, the trauma that you have to live every day, morning to night. How do you sustain yourself in such a move? Now, I got to bring my Thomas Stearns Eliot because of The Wasteland. And The Wasteland is about what? Wasted human energies, unrealized potential. The inability to be able to find yourself, gain enough self-confidence and self-respect in such a way that you actually can pursue your potentiality and capacity, whatever it is, whatever gifts that you have to cultivate it. That's what you see in the black belt. And of course, we could talk about the black belt in the 1890s. We could talk about the hood today. I grew up in the ghetto. I didn't grow up in the hood. We were broke as the Ten Commandments financially. But we wasn't hood-like. Hood's a different reality. That's why I spend time with young folk, because I don't understand it fully. Because we're in the ghetto. We had a whole lot of love. We thought we were the coolest in late modernity, not just in America, not just in the city. So we knew we had something that the world wanted, you see. But we didn't have no money. We lived in inadequate housing. We went to school. School I went to, we had 4,000 people in the school. I showed up my English class. We had 54 folk in the class. 10 of them really didn't want to be there. By the time the semester was over, it was only about 40 of us anyway. But we trying to learn, you know, we read Shakespeare, Ellison, and things. But not the highest quality of education, even though the students who were there were of high quality. The continuities of the unrealized potentiality of this wasteland, the black belt, as it were. Now, I mentioned Melville because Melville in Moby Dick, which is the greatest American novel ever written, 1851. And he begins that novel talking about the blackness of darkness, because Ishmael goes to the black side of town and he enters a black church. And it's called the trap. The trap. And these black folk are trapped. They locked in. They're in a rut. They can't burst out. They're looking for a way out. And Melville, here he is in 1851. 1851 is under white supremacist slavery, right? This is the genius of Melville. He says, I can't even begin this great American novel without beginning with the underworld. He talks about Tophet from Jeremiah, which is the human sacrifices to Moloch that allows for something else to flourish. These black lives that are overlooked, that don't matter, that don't count. So somewhere else, somebody else can flourish, somebody else can flower, but for them, they are to be sacrificed. That's what Melville, in part, is wrestling with when he's got Ishmael showing up on this black side of town. And the sermon is the blackness of darkness. And by the time you get to Ralph Ellison, the greatest of all literary artists in the 20th century, I might have some political differences with that brother, but his genius can never be called into question. And he's born in Oklahoma too. Now you all know how prejudiced I am about Oklahoma. That's why I was born. I've told you a million times. I'm going to keep telling you. I'm proud to be born in Oklahoma. That Negro was born in Oklahoma, too. But he's a genius. I'm just a regular brother. But that's all right. You turn to his moment in Invisible Man, the blackness of blackness, building on Melville's The Blackness of Darkness. And what is he talking about? The ways in which human beings, black human beings, find themselves trapped with their invisibility, which is to say the invisibility of their humanity projected, unable to be accented, to be affirmed from the white normative gaze. Living in wastelands, unrealized potential, wrestling with the heart of America's own darkness, internal like realities locked in the cave. Let me just read just a little bit before we even get to, turn to page 649. Turn to page 649 at the very bottom. This is a Dusk of Dawn. This is before we even get to the black bill. It says, difficult to let others see the full psychological meaning of caste segregation. It is as though one looking out from a dark cave in a side of an impending mountain. Anybody with me? Yeah. Top of page 650? Absolutely. In the side of an impending mountain, sees the world passing and speaks to it, speaks courteously, persuasively, showing them how these entombed souls and keep all of these different levels of meaning, these semantic possibilities in mind in reading this text. These entombed souls are hindered in their natural movement, expression, and development. And how their loosening from prison would be a matter not simply, look at this sentence here. You see, they're not going to be freed just by courtesy or sympathy or help to them, but something deeper. This is a contribution to all of humanity and aid to all the world, that they're being entrapped, they're being dominated, subjugated, hated, treated with contempt, spit on, rebuked, and so forth and so on. You see, the response is not simply connected to them, but it's connected to all of the contributions that they can make to themselves and the whole world. That means it involves each and every one of us. One talks on evenly and logically in this way, but notices that the passing throng does not even turn its head. Or if it does, glances curiously and walks on. The indifference, the callousness, or the attempt to exoticize him God, it looks like they're catching hell over there. Yes, that's just fine, Harry. Let's just keep moving. Let's just keep moving. You know that. You saw them in the movie. They can get upset. It gradually penetrates the minds of the prisoners that the people passing do not hear. That some thick sheet of invisible but horribly tangible plate glass is between them and the world. They get excited, they talk louder, they gesticulate. Some of the passing world stop in curiosity. These gesticulations seem so pointless. They laugh and pass on. They still either do not hear at all or hear but dimly, and even when they hear, they do not understand. That's the veil. They do not understand. What goes into understanding? It's not just cognition. It's not even just empathy. You see, if you really want to understand somebody, if I understand Sister Monique, Sister President Monique, I have got to be open and vulnerable enough to try to get both inside of her world and to understand that when I get inside of her world, I've got to give up certain things in my world so that I can then understand better. I'll never fully understand it. And you're from Jamaica too, right?
Yeah.
That's a big challenge too, yeah, Jamaica. Oh, Lord, I got to really get myself together. Because Jamaicans need folk. Then the people within may become hysterical. They scream, hurl themselves against the barriers, hardly realizing their bewilderment. They are screaming in a vacuum unheard, and that their antics may actually seem funny to those outside looking in. It's under such circumstances to be philosophical, think through a method of approach to deal with this veil. The entombed find themselves not simply trying to make the outer world understand their essential and common humanity, but even more, they become inured to their own experience. They keep reminding themselves that the great oppressing world outside is also real and human. And Du Bois says, what, all my life, and this is 1940, Du Bois is 72 years old. All my life, he says, I've had to continually hold my soul back and say, all white folk not scoundrels, nor murderers. They are, even as I am, painfully human. You see, now that's an achievement for black people. I need to put my glasses on and talk about this. That's an achievement for black people when you treat it so systematically, chronically, not by every white person, but by the vast majority of white persons. You say to yourself, dang, something wrong with white folk? No, there's Billy over there. He's very nice. Don't forget about Sally. That's true. What about all their cousins? They got a lot of them. They're not like them. How do you stay in contact with the humanity of folk when the vast majority of them have lost contact with yours? That's a spiritual achievement. That's a moral achievement. That's what Du Bois is talking about in 1940. 77 years ago, he said. But on the other hand, what? Then we come back home. He says, yes, on the black side, what happens? Well, a person outside of this wall of glass can speak to his own fellows, consume a facile championship of the entombed. But this is subject to two difficulties. First of all, not being possibly among the entombed, this outside leadership will continually misinterpret and compromise and complicate matters even with the best of will. And secondly, it remains impotent and unsuccessful unless it actually succeeds in freeing and making articulate the people themselves that we're talking about. So it's not going to be a matter now of just talented 10th black people coming in and dealing with a certain section of the cave. There has to be ways in which one frees up the voices, the talents, and even in certain instances, the genius of these people themselves. It's not going to be a question of just the experts. It's not even going to be a question of Dartmouth graduates feeling so highly enlightened, marching back to the hood to impose some kind of grand vision to the benighted brothers and sisters in the hood. It's going to be an egalitarian affair. Listening, being challenged, them listening to you, you challenging them. Dartmouth students have a role to play, but not the salvific role, not the missionary role, as if somehow you have been anointed with a Dartmouth degree to be the salvation of the others. Dartmouth is a grand place, but it does not have that authority. It's a magnificent place with grand students and faculty. It does not have that authority. It can empower, but it cannot transform you into messianic folk. And we saw Du Bois wrestling with this in The Talented Tenth. He's very critical of himself later on. I'm going to finish reading this here too. Practically, this group imprisonment within a group has various effects upon the prisoner. What happens? They can either become provincial and centered on the problems of a particular group and neglect the wider aspects of national life and human existence. You can become so preoccupied. Black people themselves can become so preoccupied with blackness, so preoccupied with black suffering, especially given the fact that black suffering so often is overlooked and downplayed. But become so preoccupied that you don't see the connection of black suffering with other people's suffering. You see? Catholic suffering, white suffering, Jewish suffering, Palestinian suffering. You could be so narrow as men that you don't have a fundamental concern about women's suffering, or if you're straight and somehow you're not in any way sensitive to the suffering of gay brothers and lesbian sisters and bisexual precious brothers and sisters or trans folk. It's just your particular framework. That's called provincial, parochial. But then he goes on to say what? He said, on the other hand, he's unselfish insofar as this inner group is concerned. He thinks of himself as a race person. His loyalty tends to be almost unending. His attitude toward the environing race congeals into a matter of unreasoning sentiment and even deep disbelief in them, a refusal to conceive of honesty and rational thought on their part. This attitude adds to the difficulties of conversation, intercourse, understanding between groups. So you could just use this particular paragraph as a starting point for how difficult it is to engage in Socratic dialogue, how difficult it is to engage in honest, candid conversation across race or gender or sexual orientation. And it has to be, of course, enacted. And Du Bois goes on to say, oh, but in my life, that's what it's been all about. The race concept. And what is the race concept for him? Contradictory forces and facts and tendencies. Contradictory forces, facts, and tendencies. And we just have a giant walk into class right now. She's a magnificent freedom fighter. She's an intellectual in her own right. Her name is Professor Susanna Heschel. Give it up for Susanna Heschel. Oh, we love you, our sister. Yes, we do, yes, we do. And we're going to be overlapping with her class in a couple of weeks, especially when George Yancey comes. We'll talk about the date when George Yancey comes, but also when she and I will be in dialogue in her class, because you all know her father, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, is not just an influence for me, but he's a soulmate at the deepest level, and he tries to keep me honest from the grave, but his spirit is alive. And so when she walks in, I stop the lecture on Du Bois for a few seconds and say, yeah, we glad to have you here, absolutely. But here's our dissent. Keep in mind now, each one of these levels. Here's the dissent, Du Bois, the trap, the darkest. Out Of the north, the train thundered, and we woke to see the crimson soil. That crimson, that's not the Harvard crimson. That's the red soil of fellow human beings of Georgia, stretching away bare and monotonous right and left. And yet we did not nod nor weary of the scene, for this is historic ground. Why is it historic ground? It's where our precious Cherokees were, the land of the Cherokees. Andrew Jackson, one of the models of our present president, Brother Donald Trump himself. You see, looking to Andrew Jackson, supposedly populist, supposedly dealing with everyday people, ordinary people, working people, poor people. He was the one who led that violent attack on our precious indigenous brothers and sisters in Cherokee, and that trail of tears that I'm sure you all have read about, and I hope you've taken courses with my dear brother Bruce. What's Bruce's last name? Tutu. Say it again. Tutu. That's it. He's the one I had in mind. Very much so. This is historic ground, consecrated ground. And it's not far from where Sam Holmes was crucified. We talked about Sam Holmes, didn't we? Comes back over and over again. This is 1903 talking about Sam Holmes. He's still talking about Sam Holmes in 1940. Sam Holmes was crucified, was lynched in 1899. You may stand on a spot which is today the center of the Negro problem. And of course, we've argued in this class, whether it's right or wrong, I think I'm right. There's no such thing as a Negro problem, just as there's no such thing as a Jewish problem in Europe. It's a catastrophe visited on black people in the United States, catastrophe visited on Jewish folk in the history of Europe. Don't reduce the catastrophic to the problematic. These catastrophes cut deep at all of the various levels we're talking about. So it is now. Du Bois has got us right at the center. Now, what is at the center of Dantes Inferno? It's Satan. What is it about Satan? Somebody tell me about Satan in Dante's classic. How would you characterize Satan? Somebody tell me quickly. I know some of you read it last night. Don't be shy. It's cold, icy, no care, no concern. You see, that indifference that sits at the very core of the heart. Indifference, the inability to cultivate human and humane connection, to be concerned about others. So it is about the black belt. Can you imagine what the dominant history of the United States would be if these were the major lens through which the country was viewed? Because there's some wonderful things about other aspects of America, no doubt about that. We've got much to learn from a variety of different ethnic groups and other groups, Anglos and Irish and Italians, a host of others. But if these were the dominant lens through which you understand America, see, if every night on the evening news, the first report had to do with, and it's still the case that 1 out of 2 children under 6 years old in America are living in utter poverty. Different kind of dialogue. Very different kind of dialogue. And of course, Du Bois is going to tell us something about these things which fly in the face of the dominant discourse of the country. Because if you looked at it from the vantage point of Du Bois's lens, he says, let's begin first and foremost with the poverty and how it's connected to school system, stagnating wages, mass incarceration, how it's connected to the difficulty of sustaining families, the difficulty of sustaining civic institutions. And it's not just material poverty, but callousness, Satan at the center of the lower rung of the inferno. That is a spiritual poverty that even Dante's genius could not fully depict. to be so spiritually impoverished that you can't generate an iota of insensitivity to those who are vulnerable is a form of wholesale spiritual blackout. That's what Du Bois is talking about in the Black Belt. It's the spiritual blackout of a nation that understands itself as the moral beacon to the world. Oh, we got some serious tension going on here. You can understand why Du Bois's text only sold 9,000 copies within the first 8 to 10 years and went out of print rather quickly. Now, we go back to the text and say, oh my God, that great Du Bois, he was on the cutting edge. We know he must have been popular. Don't believe the hype. Like most great canonical texts, how many copies did Melville's text sell? Brother Jed will tell you, a few hundred. Went out of print immediately. Didn't come back to print until Raymond Weaver's great work of 1921. It was published in 1851, the greatest American novel. America not ready. Not ready at all. It's like John Coltrane's music. When he gonna learn how to play the saxophone? He's playing too fast. No, just listen. The critics. Stephen Sondheim, Sunday in the Park with George. He didn't know what he's doing. He didn't know how to write a musical theater. You don't run like that. You ought to follow Hammerstein and Rogers. Don't believe the critics. Subvert it. Keep going, Stephen. So it is with Du Bois. Same challenge. He says, this is the next thing here. But we must hasten on our journey. This we pass as we leave Atlanta, the ancient land of the Cherokee. You all see that there? We must hasten our journey. The next 2 paragraphs, page, somebody yell at, page 440. Oh, thank you so much. That brave Indian nation which strove so long for its fatherhood until fate and the U.S. government drove them beyond the Mississippi. If you wish to ride with me, you must come into the Jim Crow car. Oh, my white brothers and sisters. Are you ready to give up a little white privilege? You got air conditioning maybe up there in the front. Come on back here where it's real hot. You're going to get some laughter and humanity, but you're going to have to deal with some poverty, and you're going to have to deal with what it is to be stuck, almost the opposite of the American experience in the dominant mode. America's all about the dream. It's all about mobility. It's all about moving upward. The reason why you come, everybody moves upward. The younger generation is always further along than the older generation. That's what it is to be America. That's what Gatsby had in mind when he said, Gatsby believed in the green light. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow will be bigger. Tomorrow will expand. I said, no. You're locked in generation after generation after generation. You are immobile across the board. That is the experience that he's talking about. And the poverty, and you're stuck in it. And it's tied to something that most Americans refuse or want to come to terms with. You see, which is a criminality. We had a wonderful meal last night with Sister Nancy Frazier and her wonderful husband, Eli Zaritsky. She's a distinguished philosopher, teaches at the New School. So Sister Alexis just finished up and won this Hans Jonas dissertation for the best dissertation, the New School in New York City. And she's written a piece on race and capitalism, and she talks about expropriation tied to exchange as well as exploitation. But expropriation is what? It's outright stealing, it's theft. You see, that the treatment of indigenous peoples was a form of criminality, it's a crime against humanity. You see, the treatment of an enslaved people, no matter who they are, it could be serfs in Russia, it could be slaves in the United States, it could be Irish folk vis-a-vis the British. It's a form of criminality. And to link poverty, immobility, and criminality. And criminality usually goes hand in hand with the very opposite of paideia. Mendacity. Somebody's been lying. Somebody's been reproducing the lies. Somebody's been validating the lies, somebody grounding the lies, giving them animation, giving them unbelievable vivacity. Those lies, white supremacist lies, male supremacist lies, Gentile lies, Brahmin supremacist lies against Dalit peoples, untouchable peoples, and so forth. These lies have been going on, telling these lies about women for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, about their intelligence and so forth and so on. Direct connection. And the boy says, oh, if you really want to go with me to descend into the cave, into the Inferno, come on the Jim Crow bus with me. Let us go. Let me tell the stories. What is it about stories and narratives as opposed to just argument and data and facts? It maintains a human connection. It gets us to understand, that verstehen that the Germans talk about, to understand, to be able to get outside of our own perspective. It's one of the great things about any liberal institution of higher learning, that each and every one of you get a chance to get outside of your own bubble, outside of your own silo, and be able to call it into question in some way. Not that something in that bubble is still not worth preserving. You're not going to give up everything. If you give up everything, you have no perspective to understand what you're interacting with. But it means you're willing to engage in serious dialogue and reflection. What does he go on to say? He said, there'll be no objection. Already 4 other white men and a little white girl with her nurse are in there. Usually the races are mixed in there, but the white coach is all white. The discomfort lies chiefly in the hearts of those 4 black men over there, and I'm with them in mine. We wander, we rubble south in quite a business like the bare red clay. There's the red again. The blood linked to the crimes. And what do? You get to the black belt. That strange land of what? Shadows. Chapter 8 of Plato's Republic. The land of shadows, which even slaves paled in the past, and which come now only faint and half-intelligible murmurs to the world beyond. Then he gets to Albany, the very center of the black belt. And I'm not going to go on and on and on, but we want to make a connection between Josie. Remember Josie last week? Joan of Arc? Black version of Joan of Arc, both dead in their teens as teenagers. But Josie tied to longing to learn, longing to educate, obsession with paideia. So it is in this chapter, begins with Song of Solomon. Hebrew scripture. Woman. For Du Bois, when he talks about black culture, he sees black women at the center of that culture. Doesn't make him a feminist. No, you don't want to go too easy on the brothers when it comes to patriarchal domination. It takes much, much more for men to be women identified or feminists than to just feminize a culture. It's just a symbolic gesture. It's an attempt to understand the role that women have played in the shaping and molding of the culture. And it's true that when it comes to black culture, black history, black traditions, the only one where a woman initiates the literary tradition was Phyllis Wheatley. Harriet Jacobs takes the novel in a certain direction. And the greatest pioneering playwright is Lorraine Hansberry in her 20s. The greatest novelist, well, Ralph, we love you, but sorry, we got to tell the truth. Toni Morrison. I love both of them because you don't have to choose. You don't have to look at artists as like they racehorses and who hits the tape first. But sometimes we do that. But Toni Morrison is very much a woman's affair. And the blues is Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. There's no male singers close to Sarah Vaughan, or Carmen McRae, or Ella Fitzgerald, or Billie Holiday, or Mahalia Jackson, or Aretha Franklin. We bring in Sam Cooke, bring in Johnny Hartman, bring in Donny Hathaway and Luther Vandross, but they know they are first row, second tier when it comes to the great artistic achievements. You see. So the backdrop of Josie at the center and the backdrop of that black woman in that Hebrew scriptural Song of Solomon is something that he's trying to stay in tune with. But oh, lo and behold, in this land of Canaan, you all remember that formulation? It has this land of Canaan, but Canaan for who? For who? The Canaanites? What does the Exodus look like from the vantage point of the Canaanites? Cherokee, Europeans, this is Canaan. No, this is our land, mother so-and-so. Shut my mouth. You talking about this promised land. This is their promise to you. We've been here all this time. Well, we got a different narrative. It's ours. It's promised to us. What kind of God you serve promising our land to you? Oh, so you're not Christian either. I see. You're going to need some Christianization too. Oh, here come Dartmouth. Oh, sookie now. Here come Dartmouth. We got to Christianize these folk. Their land is our Canaan. And it's not to say that you didn't have Wheelock and the others who had tremendous care. We've talked about this before in this class. I mean, I do have a certain tribute to Wheelock in terms of his vision, because he started with indigenous peoples, but he couldn't pull it off. Because anytime you engage in a critique, you see, you must never dehumanize the people you're critical of. That's very important. It's very important. See, I spent a lot of time arguing with my right-wing brothers and sisters, and I think they're wrong 92.5% of the time. But I don't want to dehumanize them because I come from a people who've been dehumanized. And I don't want to contribute to the cycle of dehumanization in human history. But you can still deeply disagree. And when he talks about a land of Canaan, that is what he's trying to get us to see. What does the USA look like from the vantage point of those whose blood constitutes the crimson soil? Crimson soil. And lo and behold, if you want to get a sense of the criminality, look how that chapter ends. Look how that chapter ends. It begins, where are we? There we sat after the long, hot drive, drinking cool water. You all see it there? 4:55. Thank you so much.
Oh, yep.
There we are. Now I got to find it again here. Here we go. The talkative little storekeeper who was my daily companion, the silent old black woman patching pantaloons and saying never a word, the ragged picture of helpless misfortune who called in just to see the preacher, and finally the neat, patronly preacher's wife, plump, yellow, light-skinned sister like Lena Horne, Smokey Robinson, and intelligent. Own land, said the wife. Well, only this house. Then she added quietly, we did buy 700 acres up yonder and paid for it, but they cheated us out of it. Sales was the owner. Sales, echoed the ragged misfortune, who was leaning against the palace trade and listening. He's a regular cheat. I worked for him 37 days this spring, and he paid me in cardboard checks, which would be cashed at the end of the month, but he never cashed them. Kept putting me off. Then the sheriff came and took my mule, took my corn, took my furniture. Furniture, I asked. But furniture is exempt from seizure by law. Well, he took it just the same, said the hard-faced man. The law don't mean nothing in the face of expropriation. The law doesn't mean anything in the face of the arbitrary deployment of power. That's force. That's fraud. That's violence, you see. That's doing what you want to do. Du Bois is saying, in some sense, when you talk about those who talk about the exceptionality of America, and America is a distinct nation. It's got some great virtues and values. But the ideology of American exceptionality and American exceptionalism too often has to do with unaccountability when it comes to the weak, like indigenous peoples or poor peoples or working peoples. So the well-to-do can use the law in the way they want to get what they want. You stealing these people's furniture. You already stole their land. You already stole their corn. What else do you want? I want the couch too. Damn. Impunity. No accountability, no answerability, no responsibility. You don't be responsible for your criminal actions, but you call yourself a defender of law and order. I want law and order. Oh, really? Applied to who? Applied to who? Very, very interesting indeed. The Quest, William Moody, brother's blood crying on brother up to dead in empty skies. The music, children, you'll be called on, just like the music, the earlier chapter was bright sparkles, having to do with how do you attempt to resurrect the people after they're dead. The black belt is about a land of the living dead. Now, of course, you can imagine a highly creative rabbi or a highly creative pastor preaching on Ezekiel. We're talking about the underworld in America. We're talking about those with dry bones, references to Eliot's Wasteland and that great poem of 1922. That's what it is to live on the underside of America, to be a living dead with dry bones. Can these dry bones live again? Can they come back and be revivified? Can they come back with the power and the potency? And that's very, very much about the very form of Song of Solomon, because Song of Solomon is not just a lyrical expression of words on a paper, but it's a song. It's music. It's sound. It's organized noise, whose fundamental aim is to do what? To speak to the entombed souls in the cave and to try to make them live again. To bring them back with a freshness, a courage, a vision, a willingness to sacrifice. Even if there's a chance of a snowball in hell that they will triumph in their generation, who cares? To be revived and resurrected is a choice of being a certain kind of human being. It's not just a choice of a calculation in regard to a victory. And it's certainly not just a matter of a personal calculation in regard to a career. The song of Quest has to do with Baruf, or calling, of vocation. Children, you'll be called on. I said, you could just remember that song the day you graduate from Dartmouth. What you gonna do with the skills, the gifts, the experiences, the interactions that you had that are so richly here at Dartmouth. You're gonna be called on. And the calling is not going to be a matter of just how much money you make. It's going to be a calling about what kind of human being you are. It's going to be a calling about how much courage you'll have in tough moments. And that's true whatever your ideology or politics. It's going to be a question of you being true to the best of yourself. You're going to be called on. And in the black belt, black folk underneath American civilization, but one of the pillars of American civilization, are called on. What is it to be called? To have a charge. Will you be sensitive? Will you be empathetic? Will you target the poverty and the immobility? Not just here, but in Latin America and Asia in the Middle East and so forth and so on. And that quest of the golden fleece is in some ways a version of what we've already seen, having to do with the golden apples of Atalanta. Now, one of the reasons why I had you all read these two chapters, I'm going to bring this to a close, though, because, it's so much rich stuff in Du Bois. We need about 5 hours. But you all kind enough to have 3. And I appreciate that. But when you talk about the colored world within, and there's a line, 695. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences down. 695. I think these are 4 of the most important words in Du Bois's corpus, not just these texts. He goes on. We cannot follow the class structures of America. We do not have the economic or political power, the ownership of machines and materials, the power to direct the processes of industry, the monopoly of capital and credit. On the other hand, even if we cannot follow this method of structure, nevertheless, and this is what worth underlining, put it in red, purple, orange. What does he say there? Somebody read it out for me.
Nevertheless, we must do something.
We must do something. You can't be stuck in the rut. You can't be caught in a trap. You can't just be satisfied with the Inferno-like conditions. You've got to do something. Find yourself enough strength to sing a song or write a poem or touch somebody to help them out, or grin when somebody's down and out, or join a protest. When we drove in last night, they had a little protest of older white brothers and sisters. You all saw them? It was the kind of, the Geritol crowd, because they're about over 70, you know. All them gray hair, they got this Black Lives Matter. I said, ooh, is this Hanover? Got the older white brothers. I said, ooh, Sister Alexis, these folks talking about Black Lives Matter. I don't see any black folk out there. That's all right, they bearing witness. They choosing to be certain kind of human beings. Did anybody know who they were?
Every weekly.
Yeah.
Are they there every week?
Yep.
Monday nights.
Every Monday. How long they been doing that? Ever since
I remember
Trevor Martin got shot, they've been doing that long?
Not since we've been here.
Ever since you've been here?
Yeah, 2 years.
Oh, have you all joined them? Go on out there and join those folk. Make that struggle more colorful. That's a beautiful thing. Somebody ask them, who are you? And we don't want to be prejudicial. Oh, we Quakers, we Mennonites. We expect that out of the Quakers and the Mennonites. They've been doing that for hundreds of years. No, we're Presbyterians. We're Congregationalists. We're secular. We're atheists and agnostics. Can't stand the church and we bearing witness. What an indictment of the church right there. Wonderful. We must do something. What you get in this chapter of Du Bois is his attempt to come up with a variety of different strategies. He's tried integration, he's tried liberalism, he's tried certain kinds of socialisms, he's tried certain kinds of connections with Garvey. Then, of course, we saw him calling Garvey into question and cooperating with J. Edgar Hoover and sending Garvey off. Now he's going to try something else. Mobilize black resources. If it's going to be a caste system, if the veil is that deep, we want to overcome it, but it looks as if it's unovercomable, so we're going to create our own attempt to sustain ourselves with our black institutions, black families, and so forth and so on. Is it black nationalism? Well, not really. Is it black separatism? Not really, because in principle I'm not a separatist, but I'm treated as if I'm separate, and it looks as if I can't overcome the impediments of being separate. Therefore, it looks like I'm a black separatist because I'm talking only to black people, but that's not the case. Du Bois, you changed your mind. We must do something. Yes, I have changed my mind. When you join the Communist Party before you leave, did you change your mind, Du Bois? Yes, I have changed my mind. I'm trying everything I can to see what is possible. That's Du Bois, and he's not the only one. He's not the only one. That's why Anybody ever ask you all, well, do you agree with W.E.B. Du Bois and his program? What's the first thing you say? Which one? You historicize the brother, you contextualize the brother, you pluralize the brother. He had a whole lot of different programs, depending on which particular moment in his project. The liberals read him and say, oh, he's our man. Then the communists say, no, he ended with us. Yes, no, the nationalists say he sounded like us. Right? Damnation of women, the black woman that say, no, he was leaning in our direction. That's right, Du Bois was all there. Some call it confusion. Others call it inconsistency. We call it partly confused, partly inconsistent. He's trying to do something. And that's a question for us.